work in words. In the beginning, so I'm told, there were words. And in fact, even right now in Kenya through the constitution, there are words. So I'll read just something briefly here that I wrote about Dr. Okelo, then I'll introduce her, then we'll take it away. This is my book called I Am From Teddy Warrior. Teddy Warrior, or rather Edward Warrior, was my father, and I'm his son. So responding to Art's call, together with Dr. Elizabeth Mary Osinia Awori Okelo, Mama Barclays, Mama McKinney, Mama KWFT, Mama Joseph Okelo, Mama Claire Liala, Mama Larry Okelo. I'm growing a forest known as Matainai Amani Park in honor of environmentalist and the 2004 Nobel Peace Laureate, the late Professor Wangari Maathai, at Palos Nature Preserve in Kibos, Kisumu, and supporting causes that ban single-use plastic that was initiated and championed by Professor Judy Wakalura Wahungu, who is a niece to Dr. Mary Okelo, and restoring Lake Victoria, the second largest freshwater lake in the world, teeming with native tilapia, predatory Nile perch, and the horrible common water hyacinth. I'm encouraged by the admirable work and life of Professor Maggie Chigozi, who taught me the name of Lake Victoria in Uganda, the Bantu language of the Baganda people known as Enyanja Malibali. So I'm carrying this book with a great deal of pride because I wrote this book at a home in Palos Kibos. In fact, it is the only place in Kisumu with the shortest poem. And the poem's title is Palos Kibos. That's the name of her farm, and that's the name of her home, which she opened up for me for the last decade, and I was able to finish this book there. And the idea of this book is very simple. If you read this book, I hope you can write your own story, but most importantly, I hope you can start telling your story. And if you write it and have an ISB, an International Standard Book number, which you can get at the National Library, it's only 1,500. You can own your story. Dr. Okelo owns her story, and I don't want to actually say her story for herself because this is actually the Women's Month. So I was tempted to say her entire name, but I reserved it for her to say it with her own voice and in her own way. So I'm only saying her official name, which is Dr. Mary, or rather Dr. Elizabeth Mary Okelo. In fact, a lot of people who worked with her in Barclays then didn't even know she was called Elizabeth, because her name, Mary Okelo, was synonymous to her as an icon and as a person. So, out of respect, I like and prefer calling her Dr. Mary Okelo, or I call her Mama, or on good and lovely days I call her Mommy. And the interesting thing is that she bears and carries a great history of the Republic of Kenya because she was even there before Kenya was called Kenya, and she's a lady of many facts. First, I like the tale about her being born the 14th of 17 children. I happen to be the 10th of 17 children, but my father was a bit ambitious, so he had 3 wives from their cash. And so, if you're born and you have many children in your family, it's one of the best seeds for becoming an entrepreneur because you make your story out of the stories of your brothers and sisters who came before you. So I'll let her share also her story of her entrepreneurial journey, beginning at a post office in Busia. At that time, Busia was neither in Kenya nor in Uganda. So she was born out of 2 countries, but she was a lady who was from Nambale, but she went and saw the whole world. Sometimes, when she told me also a lot of her tales during COVID, I wrote copious notes and someday these stories will also be shared with her and also with others. But the idea is that some people use the COVID period wisely Some people went ahead and learned about their genealogy. For example, for her, she has a very, very long genealogy. She's an educator, she's a banker, she's a philanthropist, she's a lay canon, and she loves Africa. And as they say, and as we are always taught, and as we are always told, I'm giving a moment, as we are always told, mommy knows it best. Mom knows it best. So I hope you listen to her wisdom today. I hope you engage her with questions. And I'll just show you 3 quick photos. Then I'll let her be together with Leyla. So this is her image. I don't know who can guess where she is in this image. Apart from part of course. You can actually pass it around, and anybody tells me who she is, and I'll give you guys a book if you can just tell me. But she's in that picture, and you realize that's an aerial bike which was done many years ago. And this is also one of her pictures. My own mother in the church, when I was born, whenever she showed me her black and white photos, she would tell me in Luo, Teddy, Ayo. And for those who understand the Luo, it means Teddy, I'm young and I'm at my best and at my finest. Isn't she lovely? Isn't she lovely? So you can take a picture in her picture. You can take a picture of your picture. So the last one, some of them I'll put them outside so that after this event, you can really take a picture in celebration of her. How many of you identify the ladies in this picture? So who is she? And who is the other lady? What's that? And she's also her friend, so I hope at some point that Okelo will speak about the struggles they had for women in the earlier days. So thank you, Joseph. Okelo, welcome to Africa's Talking. You're dapper dressed. So Joseph, we call it your sartorial elegance, similar to Derek there. So welcome to Africa's Talking, and we hope you can tell us something at the end. Thank you. Thank you. So Dr. Okelo, welcome and share the wisdom and story.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the session. Just a few ground rules. I'm sure, is this whose first time is it to come to this building? Your first time? Okay, so if you need to go to the bathroom, straight down, and then you turn left, right? You twist that. Let you get into your bathroom. Is there a fire exit? You just go out of the back of this, just for some security ground rules. And so the way I've formatted this conversation, obviously we want it to be just a conversation between myself and Dr. Okelo, and the idea is to give you a chance to ask questions afterwards. So please, as we're listening, please prep your questions, and somebody will come around and make sure they take the questions from you. So welcome, Dr. Mary Okelo. Actually, I was so excited. I mean, I think you and I were already having a conversation in the other room, and I kept saying we need to stop so we can go on stage and actually. As Teddy already introduced you, you're a living legend. I mean, I think we don't usually get to see a living legend, and to see a woman who's still fighting, for girls, for women, fighting for those positions, being a black woman, being an African black woman in that space. So. My first question to you is, it would be really great if you gave us an insight of, Mary the child, how you grew up. Because I always feel, and maybe a little introduction of myself. I'm Leyla Hussein, I forgot to do that. I'm actually a psychotherapist, so you'll find a lot of my questions are designed like a therapist. So I'm going to dig deep into some of these conversations. I have been working in the women and girls space for many, many years, over 20 years now. specifically with girls and women who've experienced serious sexual violence, specific around female genital mutilation. So I've led that work for many, many years. But I've also run my own company where I develop emotional well-being tools for organizations. So I want to make sure, especially Black people, Black African people of color, for us to really learn how we maintain our mental well-being. It's really key and how. And I know in this room today there are a couple of amazing female coders who are in the room who are trying to solve the problem of FGM. I understand, but when you're solving the problem of FGM, you're solving the problem of violence against women and girls. So I really want you to pay attention to this conversation. So coming back to you, maybe if you take us back a little bit, because for me, I've always said, our childhood really shape up who we are as adults. So maybe begin with that story.
First, let me thank the organizers of this forum for inviting me, particularly Teddy Warrior and Dr. Laura. Leyla, sorry, Dr. Leyla. It's an honor and a privilege, and I'm grateful to be here. You have asked me about my childhood. First, let me tell you about my names. My official names are Elizabeth Mary Okelo, but my really names are Namangare Sitaka Namalombe, Nandaulwa, Osinya Omina, Situa Bila Bunduki. I was named after my grandmother, my father's mother, who was a very tall woman with a lot of presence. Wherever she went, the audience would stop to look at her. She was, as I said, very strong, very determined, and a no-nonsense person, but very kind, generous, and very hospitable. And she's a woman who has influenced my decision making, my actions, and a woman who I look up to. I never met her, but I was told about her story, what she did, and she continues to influence me, as also my parents, my mother and my father, who gave us a very happy childhood, which we enjoyed. My father was Canon Jeremiah Awori, and my mother, Mariam Odongo Awori. My father was a clergyman, and he was sent to a place called Mambali in Busia County to set up a church. So I grew up in a mission. Our home was not an ordinary home, because during that time there were no institutions for special needs people. So my father had to put up structures for people with special needs, like the blind, like the deaf, like people who could not manage mainstream life. And people were sent to this place, to our home, to come and to stay with us. Girls who were in unhappy marriages, who had run away from unhappy marriages, came and stayed with us. So we stayed in a home which was like an institution, but with a lot of love, and a lot of care, and a lot of compassion. At any one time, there could be like 60 people in the home. Our home was an open institution, our home, where we also had even refugees during the time of our travels in Burundi and Uganda. We stayed with the refugees who came to live with us. So our home was a home with some institutional guidance and rules. We used to look up to them. We were time at home with me, but we had a lot of fun. There were days for entertainment, and one of the things that my parents did was we trained with these people with special needs and different things that they could do. For example, the blind man, you know, the blind man was not out playing the harp because the harp, and when I say harp, I feel very connected because I used to dance to the harp when I was young. And this one, okay, the blind man was playing songs, teaching people, correcting people. For example, we have a song about investment, sing and tell us about investing in long-term things, not investing money on temporary things. We used also to sing about Christianity and many different things. But we have a day for entertainment, so we would sing and we would dance. So we had a very happy upbringing. I was number 14. So I looked up to my older brothers, some of them who were very enterprised in their own ways. One of my older brothers had a good company where they played with in crocodile skins. And we would wake up in the morning and see crocodile skins in their profile on their way to the international market. We had, so seeing my brother doing this business had a bit of influence on me because it gave him a good life. We had a big house where we used to live for everything. And so this was something that was attractive because I could see what he experienced in the people's lives. My parents believed in finding out what each one of us was gifted at and directing us and encouraging us to follow our giftings and our passions. So in our family, if we have different professions and maybe we are different, for example, one of my older brother is always healing and teaching people their ability and find herbs and meditate medicine to help. And this viewer become a doctor and they were very successful in his calling. I think he was Professor Nelson and we were the first African. We were actually not much my brother was he was a minister in London and then I died. Those ones, we found that my parents realized that life politics. My father was a member of the national local council association. And my brother used to carry files for him in the way to he would carry my father's files. And eventually he became a politician. He was a minister. In addition, he was also very good at running. And my mother encouraged him. We did two Olympics, one in Rome in 1960 and another in 1964. And he set a record at Harvard University where he studied, which has not been broken for more than 60 years. So our parents always encouraged us to follow our passion, to follow our dreams. As I go on and learn, but we were encouraged, you know, what we are good at and what we want.
Because it sounds like there was a lot of love and kindness, but also what I'm hearing in your story is also, it sounded like you and your brothers were equal in the house, because usually that's not what happens, like the girls might be treated differently than the boys. Is that your experience?
Yes, we were treated equally, but my father also was a champion for girls' education. And he even gave me poems to ask and persuade parents to change their brides to school. So we do what that education is important. Because you always know if you have an educated girl, you know that the children in that home will be educated because they have education.
And obviously from your story, I understand you were born under the British colony. So what was that like growing up around that time? What impact did that have in your life as a child? And I'm going to get up, yeah.
It was good and bad. It was because there was order. We had people influence the system. Yes. But what wasn't good was the curriculum we taught the girls. We learned some very useless things. For example, Mississippi is the longest river, and we used to sing M-I-double-S-I-double-T-I. Mississippi is the longest river in the world.
Is that still happening today? No?
No,
Just checking.
Subjects of the curriculum need to be taught so that children can learn things that
Representation of themselves.
yes. For example, in the curriculum, we don't have things like self-awareness. And that is very important to know who you are, to know your identity, to know yourself. For me, the thing that has helped me a lot is knowing my identity. As I said, my grandmother influenced me a lot, even though I never met her, by the decisions she made. She was a very decisive woman, and I really appreciate what she did. In 1885, Bishop Hamilton going to Uganda. I come from near the border, and on the route which traders and other people used to do. So the emperor of this Bishop Hamilton stopped at my grandfather's house and asked the villagers were asking him if they said at that time they were not familiar with that people. They thought it was white people coming by the way. So they were opposed to that school. But my grandfather, my grandmother, took a stand and said, no, these are people who need help. So she opened her home and they stayed overnight, very much against the other people's wishes. Then again in 1895, those of you are aware of the history of Bishop Hamilton, when he went to South Uganda, he was killed there. And for some reason, they had a lot of calamities, famine and what have you, so they said they must remove the bones of the European who was killed in the land. So they removed his bones and they decided to take them back. This was in 1895. On their way back, again they stopped at grandfather's place. Again, the villagers said, "We cannot have the bones of the villagers. We must respect them." Again, my grandmother took a stand and she invited these people with the bones of people who were in her house. She was heavily pregnant, and on that night when the bones were happening, gave back the baby boy and that one was my father, whom they told him he was still my grandmother was a very decisive woman. She defied resistance and tradition was necessary. And when her husband, who was a professional hunter, refused to hunting expedition, the villagers and the clans knew said that they must be very because that was that part of the day and the tradition of the day. But she told you, that was unhappy because everybody who knows their husband had to be involved. But she refused, and when they insisted, she packed up her bags and picked up her thinking and went back to her home. I'm saying this because this also guided my decision when I left my husband. There were classmates who were willing to inherit me. And I remember what my grandmother did. Also at the funeral, my brother reminded me, he said, my sister is named after a woman who defied tradition. Because many years ago, so don't dare, because it will not happen. So my grandmother's decision making guided me, and knowing that she survived during that time, she also took a similar decision, and then that I could survive. From decision making and not accepting nonsense has always helped me. For example, when I was in the bank and I was sent to London for training. I was sent to a London part of London.
Oh, which part is that? I grew up in London. Is it East London? Yes, I grew up in East London. Is it?
Like in the 60s. Yeah, but if I go down in 5 years, the part of London is down there.
Yeah.
So when I go on my way to the bank, some approached the bank, they were calling me, you are still very late and things like that. And I said, I'm not going to have this. This is not a kind of environment that I am working. So in the first day, I just met the manager and I said, I'm sorry, I don't think I can work here. Of course, it was not a very easy thing. Here I am, a black woman, a very old woman, I was in my 20s, telling a white person
In London.
in London,
Yeah.
that yes, they have seen her is to do her business. But I could do that because at the back of my mind, I had my long plans and things that they were not good enough for her to marry them. So having your identity and knowing who you are has helped me in many situations. And that's why when I was at school, when I was in running my team, we always wanted the children to know who they are, to discover their identity, so that they can know who they are and deal with challenges that come their way. Because if you know where you are, who you are. I was reading Teddy's book, which talks I am from. If you know where you are coming from, nobody can bully you because you know you have somewhere safe, somewhere to go back.
Absolutely, and I think what you touched on, it's what you were taught very early on from your father, from your grandmother, that you have agency, that you could speak and say no, which unfortunately that's not the case for a lot of girls. So maybe I want to come to Maybe if you just touch briefly on your how you end up working in the banks and your business. Like, how did you get to the space of business? How did that journey begin before we get to the school? I think that makes more sense. Yes.
Well, let me start where I went from school. Where I went.
Yeah.
I did my O level at Okelo Girls High School. One of our notable alumni is Her Excellency Rachel Ruto. Since we went, and that is the school I went to. It was a Christian school, very strict rules and discipline. I enjoyed it, but there times I didn't like that school because we were 30 in a class, about 30 students, girls in one class. And one of the subjects we had to do was Latin. At that time, I didn't know the value of Latin, but I was among 5 girls who were forced to continue with it up to O level. After my O level, in 1962, the government decided to start A level. This is Cambridge examination. So they started the advanced Cambridge certificate examination at Alliance Girls High School, and they selected 13 girls to start the A level at Alliance Girls High School. They took 7 girls from Putere and 6 girls from Alliance, and we started the A level. When we started, we were told we had to work hard, we had to excel, otherwise the government was not going to invest in girls' education if we failed. So we worked very hard, and by the grace of God, I think we all excelled. In that class, we had Justice Effie Owor, who was the first woman judge. We had Professor Florida Karani, who was the first Deputy Vice Chancellor of Nairobi University. We had Elizabeth Mwangi, but better known as Charity in the Citizen play on TV, better known as Mother-in-law. And so our class had outstanding people. And of course me, I became the first woman bank manager. So we lived up to the expectations. We were told we had to excel, and we did excel. And we are happy that because of our performance, they continued to give advanced higher education to girls in Kenya. If we had failed, we were told, all of you girls, you would not have gone to your A levels and continued to university. So you owe us some gratitude.
For your hard work, owe them gratitude. What was it like to be a female head of a bank at that time? What was that like? What was that experience like?
The experience was not easy. First, let me tell you, even getting into the bank itself was not very easy. After my career, I worked shortly at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. My stay there was short-lived because my boss started having advances towards it. At that time, we didn't even have this word sexual harassment. But I realized that I could not win with my boss trying to make advances to me. So I suddenly quit after I think only 6 months, because I knew I was not going to win against my boss who was making advances. I left without knowing where I was going because That's the job I had gotten straight from the university. But I heard that the Barclays Bank was hiring undergraduates and sending them for training in banking. I applied 4 times. The first time I was told I was a woman. The second time I was told I had not done economics because at university I got a Bachelor of Arts degree in history honors. So there were always obstacles, I was told. So on the fourth attempt, then they agreed to take me on with the warnings, you must succeed, you must not do this. Things they didn't even tell the men who had gone.
So there was a different expectations for you because you're a woman.
Because I was a woman. So that's why I was sent to London for training. After coming back, I was posted in a branch where I had a problem because when the branch I was sent to was the Pioneer branch. The European manager there had some racial tendencies, and he, apart from racial tendencies, I think he just didn't know how to lead or manage people. So he used to use very derogative language on people. And I used to watch him, and one day I went to his office, and politely I told him, we cannot get customers if you are so rude to them, if you are not treating them well. But he took it badly. Who was I? An African woman telling Amzuzu that he's not. So I was hurriedly transferred to another branch because they said I was insubordinate, but really what it was just I was trying to point out that you have to treat people with dignity.
Kindness goes a long way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I was sent to another branch. That was my first branch. The next branch I went to was Kenyatta Avenue, where my boss was a famous man called Peter Nyakiamo, who was minister later on and head of Kenya Commercial Bank. He was a very good man, but very conservative. At that time, women didn't have bank accounts. The only people who had accounts were maybe women employees in the government, teachers, and those kind of people. But even them, they only had accounts for the purposes of receiving their salaries. So I started persuading him. I said, can we open accounts for women? And he was very adamant. He told me, you cannot upset the establishment. So I had to find a way of going around this strict rule. Fortunately, when I was growing up, my parents always opened savings accounts for us at the post office. So I used the fact that we had accounts when we were young and persuaded the bank to open accounts for children. Fortunately, they agreed and we opened accounts for children. And through that, we could get women coming to the bank because they could say they are coming to save for the children. And slowly, we started persuading the bank to open accounts for women. It was not easy for women to get loans. Any woman who wanted a loan had to have a guarantor, a male guarantor, because we were still under the colonial rules, the Victorian rules, which said women and Napoleonic rules also, which classified women and children and lunatics in the same category. So women could not get access to financial products, financial services. But through the children's accounts, at least we started seeing women coming to the bank and getting familiar with bank services. But loans, they had to have a male guarantor. I remember one time I put my career online. I gave a loan to a very successful woman. In fact, she was the first woman to start her own PR company in the country. She was a divorcee, therefore she didn't have a male to guarantee for her. But I knew that she would service the loan, and I knew she would pay back. So I gave her the loan, but nevertheless I was told and I was scolded and given warning that if I continued to give money to the women, I would lose my job. At the same time, in the bank, women were not managers. They were tea girls, clerks, secretaries, cleaners, but they were not in managerial position. So I was alone, and I started an association of Barclays Bank women. In that association, I sensitized women to think about rising from the lowly positions they were in and vie for managerial positions. But of course, I knew that they couldn't just jump to become managers without going through the training. So what I used to do, I used to photocopy my notes from the Institute of Bankers London, because when I was in London, we had to do the diploma in banking. So I had my notes, I would photocopy and have meetings with these ladies and encourage them. I said, if you have the professional qualifications, it will be easy for us to lobby for you to get into managerial positions. So that's what I used to do. I would photocopy, have meetings, talk to them. But it was not easy, because when people saw us meeting, they said, oh, Mary Okelo has started a union in the bank. So many times I was called to head office to explain what I was doing with the women having meetings. So what I used to tell them is, no, these are social gatherings, talking about how we can collect money to buy flowers for people who are sick in the hospitals. So of course they would buy it, but sometimes people would come and listen to what we were doing. And so many times I was told to explain, but many times I also proved that we were also doing some social work, visiting the sick and buying for the flowers.
You had to keep it balanced to make
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So this continued, and we managed to get women who took it seriously. They studied, and then because I was the only person at the managerial meetings, when any woman did well and I could see that they had the managerial potential, I would mention her name in the meetings and lobby for that woman to get appointed to managerial positions. And in 1972, we had Agatha Obari become a supervisor, the first woman supervisor in the bank. So slowly, we were encouraging each other, supporting one another, just to vie for managerial positions. And I'm happy to say that through that mentoring program, it grew and grew. And at one time, Barclays Bank had the highest number of women managers in the country. Other banks also followed. And I'm happy to say that today we have women in managerial positions, we have women on bank boards, and even Barclays made history by at one time having 50% of its board composed of women. So things began to improve.
Well, round of applause for that. You started by taking flowers to the hospital to now leading to this.
Yes. But I think the biggest breakthrough was in 1998, I think, when the government made a task force to review all laws relating to women. That task force was chaired by Justice F.E. Ward. I chaired the economics committee, so it meant I looked at all the laws in the banks that prohibited women from accessing bank services and bank products. So after that task force, all discriminatory laws against women in the banks and other places were removed. So from that time, women could walk confidently into the bank knowing there were no laws. Of course, the practices could have been there, but at least the laws could not stop them from accessing bank facilities and
I mean, what you're describing is because of the work that you've done, a lot of women in this room now have bank accounts. I mean, that's what, this is so recent. In the 1993?
1998 when they removed the
Yeah, that's not long ago. That's not
I think it is when the actual laws were removed. So before that we were just smuggling women into the bank.
Wow.
And
I love a woman who's a troublemaker.
But in 1982 we started the Kenya Women Finance Trust, and this was to help women get access and get training in financial management. It was not a very easy one to start the Kenya Women Finance Trust, but Kenya Women Finance is a product of a global movement in a way, because in 1975 there was a big UN meeting in Mexico where they looked at the status of women globally, and they saw how women didn't have access to decision making, to finances, to so many things. So in different countries of the world, people came up with solutions. And one of the solutions that came up was Women's World Banking, which was started by a lady called Michaela Walsh, who was the first president of Women's World Banking. In 1979, there was a big meeting of people who were keen on issues of women in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. My bank boss, Mr. Myers, was a very kind man. He allowed me to attend that meeting. And that was the beginning of Women's World Banking, which became an avenue for advocating for women's access to credit and other financial services.
And this is, I'm assuming, what led to, I mean, you sat on many numerous boards and committees, but this led to you sitting on the World Bank Advisory Council for Gender and Development. What have been some of the most important lessons you learned from sitting on that board?
That we have to be proactive on promoting the issues of women.
Yeah.
That it will not just happen. We have to take action. On going to Washington and listening to what was happening, it meant we have to take a cap ourselves. Projects can be done, but with now consideration to the special needs of women. So you have to be proactive and push the agenda of women to see that things that they are doing are gender sensitive and that women's issues are taken care of. And I don't think we have arrived. We have to keep speaking. We have to keep pushing for women. If you look around, how many women are on boards anywhere? How many women are in decision making? Even here in Kenya, we had that 2/3 gender rule, but the women are not there. So we have to keep working on it. And wherever we are, if you have a chance, then you can do it. At Makini, the school we had about 9 campuses. And 8 of them were manned by women. It's only one which was manned by a man because he was very good with the little children and he used to play for their music. And if it wasn't for that, I think I would have pushed for even that one to be headed by a woman. So we have to take action.
So, if I come back to the school you founded, McKinney School, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about how that, what was the reason you wanted to found that school?
We started our school in 1978. At that time, there were many things happening. First, Kenya was having a very high population growth. I think it was at 5% per annum. It was one of the highest growth rate in the world. So we were producing very many children, and the government didn't have enough space. So schools were overcrowded. Classrooms, 70 children per child. So standards were falling. So we needed to have to come up with an institution that could provide quality education. So we could, so there was, and also there was a middle class coming up who were looking for quality education for their children. So they were looking for where they could take their children. The good schools were mainly missionary schools, the Msongaris, the St. Mary's, but these were very few. The others were international schools, but the middle class that was coming up was looking for an African school with the African education. So there were gaps there. So there was a market, there was a place we could go. I also had a daughter who was reading very fast, and we thought maybe she's one of these people who need extra attention.
A place to cultivate her skills.
Yes. And so we felt we needed to set up something that could cater for all those needs that I have said. And I'm glad we did, because I think it helped, it gave, we ended up with giving good education to children in Kenya. We were the first school to introduce computers. We were fought, we didn't get the government support to introduce computers. In fact, we were almost discouraged, because when we said we were bringing computers, they thought that was a luxury. We were seeing far, the government was not supportive. So even though they gave us a hard time, we managed to bring in computers, and we were happy that it gave children a good head start in learning to use computers. And we also wanted a school where children could be themselves, where they could nurture their talents. As I said, I came from a background where my parents looked for each one's gifting and nurtured and encouraged. So we didn't want those children to come and just sit there, but children could discover themselves, could find out who they were. We are a product of colonial education, colonial culture. So we also wanted a school where children could discover who they were, or who they are as Africans. We tried to get the government to look at the curriculum, particularly in the area of self-awareness, and also in the area of decolonizing our minds, because those of us who grew up in the colonial time have these things still in our minds. We sometimes think like our colonial masters. I remember when we chose our uniform, we chose red, blue, and white. We didn't think about it, but subconsciously we realized that were the colors of the Union Jack. So you can see the damage.
It's the conditioning.
The conditioning, yes.
So you have to start deprogramming.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's what we have been saying. We need the government
Yeah.
to look at the curriculum and decolonize our minds so that we can be ourselves, so that we can solve our problems and
And actually, you reminded me of, for example, the health system.
yes.
Till now, I hear a lot of health professionals who say to me, when they get trained, they're trained within the context of the West.
Yes.
They're actually not taught about black women's bodies.
No.
They're still taught in that context. And for example, the girl who does my hair was telling me when she went to beauty school, the braiding they had to learn it with white women's hair. They still don't provide Afro women's hair even in beauty salons, even though they're here. So it's embedded in every system in terms of, it's not just the school curriculum, but it's actually every trade that we're learning. It's always within the context of the West and not African people themselves. I mean, your work, you've been, even as you're speaking, you've been adamant, that we have to, work with women and girls. I mean, this has been very important for you, but why girls? Because, people always ask me this question, because I currently work in a program which is a girl-designed program, and I don't apologize if it's a girl-designed program, because people always throw, why not boys and men? And I'm like, well, men and boys, they've had their privileges, like they already had a bank account and they could inherit everything. So for me, it was creating that space. What would maybe share your experience why that has been so important that we do have to focus on women and girls specifically.
Well, women and girls already are disadvantaged, but they have a lot of skills and perspectives that add value to what we do. So it's very important that their voice is heard, that their skills and their talents are utilized. And they also have more empathy. I believe you are a mental person. I think women seem to have certain traits and qualities that men may not have. And if they are brought together and combined, we create more productive.
So are you saying men are scared of us in case we learn what we could do? Because that's really the intention, right? Like if you really dig deep, there is this sense of, oh God, don't let these women to be too powerful, they might take over.
Yes.
There's a fear of
There
this.
is that fear. But I think this is where we need sometimes, we need also men to be sensitized. Yeah, so that
Deprogram men as well.
Exactly, so
Yeah.
that they understand that we are not a threat, but
Exactly.
we are complementing what they are
Absolutely.
doing, so that whatever we do
Yeah.
is wholesome.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I mean, for me, I always say we need to revolutionize from the inside. So it's important if you're a young parent that you really are having these conversations with your kids. That if you're a mother to a son, you need to have that conversation that women are equal to them. Because I think society always puts these discriminations and these views that women are still treated as, yeah.
Yes, but I think when results show, as I said earlier, women who are the untouchables of the banking world. But when women grew up and they started savings and they started chamas, they became so attractive to the bank. The same people who are keeping them away are now looking for women chamas and women savings to give them money.
Exactly. Yeah. Actually, the same thing happened in my country, in Somalia, when the war happened. The families had a little bit of money, and what did? They sent their sons to go to the West. Hopefully, the sons were going to work, and actually, those sons disappeared. No one knew what happened. The only ones who sent their daughters, because there was something about the daughter feeling, I really need to take care of my family. So now, when you go to Mogadishu city, all the big villas, there's actually a statement, oh, that's a house of a daughter. So the daughters are now building these homes. So you can see that that view is now changing. oh, actually, we need to invest in our daughters because look what happens. Yeah.
And I think they even did a study on that, and they proved that girls have been supporting their parents more than
Boys are, yeah.
the boys. Yes.
But do we know why? Is that because girls have felt that pressure or that conditioning where boys never had to feel that? Is that? I'm putting my therapy hat on because there is a human condition here we need to address, right? Is that why that happens?
I think because women are they're naturals of life. They're the ones who give back to children. They have that innate feeling of compassion, feeling of needing to care. Because they care for children from from zero.
You learn that.
So we have a caring spirit because that's what nature has given us to do. Yeah, I always say if women were the chiefs during the slave trade, I don't think we would have lost so many of our boys who were being taken as slaves.
Well, I think I always say that maybe it's time we give women a chance to rule the world now. I think we kind of, no offense to the men, you guys have made a bit of a mess. You know? Look what they left us with.
They will not give us. We just have to fight.
We have to slowly fight.
Yes.
So, I mean, in your career, you've been successful entrepreneur, investor for many years. What advice would you give to someone who wants to start a business? I'm sure there's a lot of upcoming entrepreneurs in this room. What advice would you give them?
Before I go to that, I wasn't just successful. We faced many challenges also. So if you want to go into business, you have to be prepared that you will face many challenges. That is not a short-term thing. We ran our school for 40 years before I retired. You will face many challenges. So you have to examine yourself. Do you have that stamina for the long haul to, to suffer and deal with the challenges? There are challenges sometimes which can threaten your business.
Maybe do you want to share one or two you faced? Give an example.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we faced was for the school expansion. We took a loan from the World Bank. It was a loan in dollars. We had gone to the central bank to request for a hedging mechanism so that if there are fluctuations in the foreign exchange, we would be protected. But we were not given. So we took a loan. At that time, the dollar was 42 shillings to the shilling. Unfortunately, there were problems in the country. The dollar loan was to construct an international baccalaureate school for international students. But in the 90s, there was a problem in the country, just like what we are going through these demonstrations. It wasn't demonstrations, but there was a problem. And all our international students who are coming to pay in dollars cancelled their places. So we were left with a dollar loan, but with no dollars to pay. So it was very scary. But we had to go back to the World Bank and renegotiate the sum. So they extended the period. Yes. But now by the time we were paying, the shilling had dropped. It was like 80 to the dollar when we borrowed at 42. So we were almost paying double. And that is a big strain on a business if you are having to pay double. So financing is a problem. And that is one we went through. Another serious problem that we faced, my husband, who was the chairman of the school, was killed in an accident, a car accident. It was a mysterious car accident, so we needed to get some investigation done. So he died at a time we still have this loan. But at the same time, we needed an investigation to establish how it had happened. So you have a court case you have a loan to pay, and you have a business to run, it was not very easy.
And you're a woman.
And you're a woman. But fortunately, I had my children who were helping me.
Protecting you, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But those are some of the challenges, because sometimes life comes up with unexpected happenings. But I would encourage anybody who wants to go into business to go. It is a lot of fun, apart from the challenges.
Maybe talk about the fun side of the business.
Well, when you see, like we were in a school, when you see some of your children doing so well, like we had this girl, we have Irene Mutungi, who was the first woman pilot. When you see a child who has been in your school, and there are so many,
That's
like
the outcome, that's your fruits. of your labor.
exactly, yes. Yeah, there was a time I had to go to Nairobi for medical checkup. And suddenly I was surrounded by about 6 doctors. They had even come from different departments. And when I looked at them, they were all from McKinney. They were my old students. So the feeling that I'm in the hands of I was safe, but the gratification that you feel that people you saw very little have now grown up, they are doctors, they are pilots, they are engineers, and they are doing so many other things, and they are contributing to building the country. So you feel very, very happy.
So these are, I'm sure there's loads of your kids in this room and
I don't know whether there are any, but if there are not, we have many out there.
But I totally understand in terms of, because seeing the outcome of your hard work always gives you that joy.
It makes you feel
makes you
very,
feel joyful.
very happy.
Yeah.
And also something that makes me very happy is that about 32 of our teachers now own their schools. So we feel they carry the values of the Makini school out there, because our motto was Fanya kwa Makini, work with diligence and integrity. So when we see our teachers setting up schools there, then we are multiplying. So we are growing, and those people are employers. Those people are nurturing children. So I think that feeling of growth in itself.
You built such a big, massive community of educators.
Yes,
who are also educating.
we are also educating. And then also when we see some of our teachers, because at McKinney we invested heavily in staff development, training staff, mentoring them, coaching them, so that they are the best as they could be. So when you see them being taken by others, I remember one of our teachers, Mr. Okelo, who was taken by the Aga Khan schools, and he grew up there to be head of the Aga Khan schools globally. So when you see such things, we have some of the teachers we trained in other countries, in Rwanda, in Uganda, everywhere, and you feel good that you are contributing, you are growing, you are not stagnating. So businesses are good because they give you an opportunity to grow, to impact lives, to touch many people.
Well, I promised you I was going to keep you here for an hour, so I'm just coming to the end. And one of the things I love to do when I'm moderating any conversation, obviously, we talk about whoever our keynote is, their careers and how they got to that position. But I like asking things like, how do you take care of yourself? Or how do you maintain your well-being? Because, when you're working like this, I think it's important, especially there's a lot of young people in this room. We don't want them to assume you have to be at that pace at all times. So maybe just share, how do you maintain your sanity and peace while doing this?
Well, if you are in business, self-care is good, because you have to be.
Are you hearing this, kids?
You have to be in good form
Yeah.
in order to serve people. So for me, it has always been, I have to have a discipline to do my exercise.
There you go.
We always, my husband and I would run around our estate for an hour between 5 and 6. Our children used to join us.
Now that they're independent, they had the agency to say no.
Yeah.
You taught them.
So discipline, exercise, also good food. meditation,
Yes.
and just
Taking good care of yourself.
good, and I'm not embarrassed about that.
Oh no, we shouldn't. I think we have to. The reason I'm saying that question, I think, you know, it's how your grandmother influenced you, your
Yes.
mother influenced you. I know my grandmother influenced me, my mother had, but I always feel like I have a daughter who's going to be 21 soon. For me, it's important that I embody self-care
Yes.
because I want her to see it that I don't, because there's an assumption, especially black women, they're always suffering, they're always struggling. And I'm trying to always bring joy. Like on the weekends, we have a list. Let's do something that makes us happy, joyful. And that could just mean watching Netflix, binging on a really terrible reality show. But it means we have to, there's a need for especially black people to have joy and happiness and take care of themselves. Because it's always, because we have a history of struggling.
Yes.
And that's why I'm always trying to bring this into the space. Yeah.
And people make us feel guilty.
For resting, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
For resting or for treating yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to rise above that.
Yeah.
Ignore what they say
Yeah.
and do what you do. I swim every morning and
Amazing.
I don't care what people say.
Absolutely.
Because they say I should be in the garden.
You're like, I want to swim.
So you just have to look after yourself. Nobody will look after you.
Exactly. And what I've learned through that, it's you're disposable. If you don't take care of yourself and you get sick, you'll be replaced very quickly. So you have to think about it's really important, especially if you're in a space of influencing. It's important that you embody self-care. Yeah.
Yeah, but also even that self-care goes about the responsibilities you have. Like if you are a married woman and you are working, there are times you may be promoted to a senior position at a time when it might cause inconvenience to the family. So you may have to look at long-term versus short-term. I say this because in 1973 I was promoted to become a branch manager in Nakuru. At that time, my husband was a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. We had only one university in the country. So if I went to Nakuru, it meant I would have split the family. My children were small. I could not leave them with my husband because he was a busy person at work. I could not take them alone because they had started school in Nairobi. So I had to forgo my promotion. I went to the bank and I said, I'm sorry, I can't take this promotion because it's going to cause me a lot of inconvenience and it will disrupt my family life. It was a choice I made, it was a sacrifice I made, but I don't regret it because later on I got those promotions. So sometimes you have to take very tough decisions. Sometimes I know when you are promoted, when you get a promotion, you may think if you don't take it, you will never get another one. No, that they are openings. Don't sacrifice your family. That's what I keep telling ladies. Stick to your family, nurture your family, because in old age it is now my family that is keeping me happy and joyful. So family is important.
Just two more questions. I've very much been influenced by a book that I read at the age of 14, which was Noah Sadai's The Hidden Face of Eve, that really taught me about the struggle of African women and African feminism. So I always thought feminism was white women, but I actually didn't realize feminism actually started here. So my question to you is there a book that you read that has influenced the work that you're doing?
I have read a lot of inspirational books, you all know them. The Carnegie's, How to Make Friends and things like that. I still read them. But the last book I've been reading is Teddy's book about I Am From. And that book has impacted me because if you know where you are from, as I said, nobody can bully you. And this is why I say, us as Africans, we have to know where we have come from. We come from a very rich continent, a continent full of resources that everybody is uh, eyeing and taking. If we know how rich our continent is, if we know how rich our culture is in taking care of ourselves, in taking care of the old, and in just looking after one another, we wouldn't even be in a hurry to go out. We would be looking at how we can utilize the resources that God has given us to bring up our continent. So it's very important to know our identity, to know ourselves, to know who we are, and to preserve our self-dignity so that nobody tells us that we are, we are inferior, we are poor. If somebody says we are poor and they are coming to dig our gold,
I know, right?
I mean, does that make sense?
Oh, we need to come back for part 2 of that conversation. Really, I think it's, I was saying to you earlier, I moved to Kenya 2 years ago, but I've been coming back and forth in Kenya for the last 10 years now. So when I go back to the US or the UK and I tell them I moved to Kenya, there's shock horror in their face. Like, why? Is it okay? And they always ask me, how is the democracy? I'm like, how is your democracy in your country? Like, but there's an assumption always, and I think and I think this is why it's so important we know our own history, our own identity, because when you know that, you know you can answer those questions, and you know you can sit there with your, being proud, and I really do. When I'm out of Africa, I do sit in spaces feeling extremely proud of my identity and who I am. So it's key. It's so key.
We have to know who we are.
We have to know.
We have to know our identity, and we have to know that we come from a continent that is one of the richest, that has the best climate, that has everything, and the beauty of our continent.
It's so pretty. Nice. Yeah.
What can we say?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to end this session. Thank you so much for giving us a space to have this conversation. And I know the audience are dying to ask you questions. So if we begin with the conversation, we'll go, yes, thank you so much. So anyone, if you put your hand up. Okay, there's a question here.
Hello everyone.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Hello everyone. My name is Margaret Njeri from Kajiado County. So I'm happy to have an opportunity, at least to discuss or to have an opportunity to hear a phenomenal woman speaking on issues that has made Kenya be where it is right now. But now I have a question. As Mary Okelo, when you're younger, when you're young, okay, right now.
Just say as it is.
Don't edit yourself, just go for it.
Okay, do you see the Kenya that we usually say we want a greater future for Kenya? And you have been here so many years. So do you see the future that you wanted to see? Like, do you see